Mr. Hanlon was kind enough to let me come in and chat with you guys and have a little mini lesson today with you. And we've been doing a lot of writing and poetry, and we're kind of getting to a point, maybe some of you with your personal anthologies, where you're needing to go back into your poems to edit them. You've already written some, and so you need to kind of go back through with a set of new eyes and look back at your poetry. One thing I find when I'm writing poems is when I go back and I read it, sometimes the ending kind of fizzles out and it's not very exciting at the end. It's not very powerful. Do you guys find that with your poems at all? Is that a problem that you come across? Yeah? Put your finger on your nose if that's something that you are having a tough time with. Okay, so there's a few of you. So there's a poet, his name is Ralph Fletcher, and he has some advice about this, and he's come across this problem as well. So I'm going to read to you guys what he has to say about that. He says, I was working on a collection of poems about moving. I moved twice when I was little, and moving stirred up all kinds of emotions. How many of you guys have moved in your lifetime? Tons of people. So let's see, let's hear from 3 people about their experience with moving, some of their emotions. Let's see, Catherine.
A few years ago, when I was 6 years old, I was moving to Shanghai. I went to the lecture line, but when I was moving to Shanghai, I was actually super mad.
Super mad.
I was so happy.
Why were you upset?
Because I had this friend that I've been supposed to for years, and we still try to talk, but we can't talk.
So saying goodbye to friends can bring about a lot of emotions. Abby, what's your experience? What are some feelings you had when you moved?
Well, I felt really sad and everything and cried and everything. But they really made, but I'm glad that my mom had their parents dinner and everything. And I was happy that I had friends like this, and they even set up a big party.
Oh, fun. So they had a nice goodbye party for you. That's gotta make you feel good. Okay, let's hear from one more person. Who else has moved? Felix, what's your experience?
I've moved with my best friend. I've been playing with him since 3 months. I'm really happy with
Yeah, it's hard to say goodbye to those friends. Well, Ralph agrees with all of you guys. He says one poem that he wanted to write about in his book about moving was about saying goodbye to friends. So I have up here his poem that he wrote, and I'm going to read it to you guys, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. It's called Goodbye. It says, next morning, I have to go for good. Fred finally comes out of his house, looking at me funny, a little shy, like he doesn't know me anymore. Another kid might have said stuff like, all right, I'll call, I'll send you an email. But I've known him since we were 2, and that kind of lie won't fly with us. Later, I say, which sounds real lame. Then, all of a sudden, my throat gets tight, and there's a sight that I will never forget. My best friend walking away, forever walking away. I look back at him through the back window as we drive off until I can't see him. Maybe you can replace most things, but some things you can't replace. Okay, I want you guys to turn and talk with somebody sitting next to you, and I want you to decide in this poem, what do you think the strongest, the most powerful line in this poem is, okay? So, go. Okay. What are you girls thinking? Well, yeah, but we don't even line to say something. No, that's true. What do you think?
I think it's we can't see
Okay, so let's see. Let's hear from 3 people about what your group thought was the strongest line. I heard some of these guys. Let's see, Ronan, what did your group talk about? The last line, and what does it say?
But some things you can't replace.
Okay, why do you think that that's the strongest?
It's mostly about the whole poem.
Okay,
How, like, you can't replace it.
okay. What makes it sound powerful to you? Is there,
Just because it's a really strong ending and it sort of, like, says what the whole poem's about.
okay, kind of wraps everything up? Okay. Catherine, what did your group decide?
I agree with you.
Okay, so you guys have the same opinion? Looks like you're eating something, so I'm gonna ask for somebody else while you're doing that, okay? Is there anybody who felt differently than these 2 groups? Does anybody find a different line in the poem as the most powerful? Ricky, can you sit up before you talk?
But there's a sight I will never forget because it says you'll never forget this sight.
Okay, so we're looking at a couple different lines. Does anybody have a different opinion? Catherine, you have the same opinion, right?
I have the same opinion as Ronan because, like, people, it's a very powerful ending because just pick up you moving away from your closest friend or, like, even your mother because you have to, like, go to somewhere else.
Right, so you guys all kind of agree that maybe either the sight I'll never forget, my best friend forever walking away, that line or that stanza, or the last line that he has. So I'm going to tell you what he thought, because poetry is really personal, so everybody might find a different line in the poem that is the most powerful to them. But when he reread his poem, this is what he said. When I reread this poem, I saw lots of stuff I liked, but it seemed too long. Does anybody agree with that? Kind of? Does it kind of go on? He says, in the last stanza, so this right here, I think I'm doing too much explaining, which takes energy out of the poem. And this is what he thinks. I think my strongest line is the last line in the 3rd stanza. My best friend forever walking away. When I did my final draft, I decided to see what would happen if I ended with that line. And then he made some other revisions too. So he went through and he looked at some other things and came up with another draft, completely redid his poem. Let's see, you guys can help me, tell me to go up or down here. Can you read it?
Yeah.
Good? There we go. Okay, so he's changed the title as well. So let's read this one and we'll talk about that a little bit. So now he's titled the poem Later. Fred finally comes out of his house looking at me funny, a little shy, like he doesn't know me anymore. Another kid might have said stuff like, I'll email, I'll call, I'll come visit, but I've known him too long to lie. Later, I say, which sounds real lame. Then there's a sight I will never forget. My best friend forever walking away. What do you guys think of the poem now? Who has some thoughts and opinions on kind of if it sounds more powerful or how changing and ending on that line changed the feeling of the poem? What are you guys thinking? What are your opinions about that? Isabel?
I think it's kind of sad because it's like later, and not that perfect, but there's just the side I will forget. I
Mm-hmm.
will never forget my best friend's little walk away. It sounds kind of sad.
Definitely. Do you think that it sounds different than having it be kind of still in the middle of the poem? Having that be the last thing that you're thinking about? Does that change?
It sounds more sad because if you put it in the middle, then it'll be like a little sad, and if it doesn't end up happy, it'll be
Right, okay. Who else has some opinions? Brian?
It's like when he left, he said like later to his friend, but then his friend was something like that, and he's like, you failed to be friend.
Yeah, or maybe he just didn't include. When I read that line, when he says later, do you think that's all he wanted to say to his friend leaving?
Sounds like he's going away from people.
Yeah, it doesn't quite match that whole intensity of moving away forever. And so I think that last line really kind of makes that very clear. Abby, what do you think?
I think that when he says later, it sounds kind of like he's thinking that you're such a traitor. You don't even say bye or cry or anything. So you know what? I'm just gonna say later because I hate you.
Well, and that's not how he's feeling, right? We can tell because we know what's going on in his head. That's what they're sharing with us. That's what the author is sharing. So what I want you to take from this is you guys have written some poems for your anthology. Do you think that you could go back through and look at some of your poems and identify what you think the strongest line is? That's a goal that I want you guys to try to do today. Looking back on some of your poems and figuring out what is my strongest line. Could I rewrite my poem? Could I change some things around to end with that? Or could I use that strongest line and branch off of that to make the poem more powerful? Just like in writing our 5-paragraph essays, poetry is the same. You don't just write one and done. It's okay to go back and revise and rewrite, okay?
Yes.
So, there's no formula to poetry. I want you guys to be okay with writing more than one draft. And the goal for today is, who can tell me? Ronan.
Like your first poem, like you have to edit and look back at the poem straight and figure out
The strongest line, yeah. See if you can end with that, or if you can use that in a more powerful way, okay? So, I want you guys to get your notebooks or your computers. How are you having them work? Either one? Okay, you guys know where they are? So go back and edit now, and we can look at those.
You did, Ricky. I did. That's a number. This is a number.
Right.
It might be a bit more challenging with some of those poems that have the rhyming structures, or the, not rhyming structures, but like your, like a haiku, those kinds of ones are a bit more challenging to find that powerful line and be able to rework it because there's so much structure. So I would encourage you to find another poem that you can look at to find your strongest line.
Give us some advice. Or just
How are your poems going? Well, can I see the one that you wrote? Oh, how you
Wait, is make?
So let's look at this one. Huh? How many times do you clap when you say the word make?
Hackers make me
So I want you to go back up to this one and read through it and decide what you think. That from Saving My Life is pretty cool.
Stop. Annoying is 3. A 4? Okay, that's me. That's 5. Hackers make me mad. Hackers make me mad. It's haiku. Stop. 1, 4, 5.
What do you think? I almost think I think it would be really powerful to just stop there after Saving My Life. And then you could have a whole nother one of how they're a duo that get out of, tight situations and things like that. You could have kind of 2 different themes going on. And then you can reread through this one and decide what is it that you want the reader to get out of that poem. And then look for the line that really kind of drives that point home. How are yours going? You're doing
Hackers
trends,
make me
right?
mad. Stop triggering. Can you stop triggering?
Okay.
Ask Coletta. She did it. She was doing her.
There's some like tangible feeling when you're feeling slime, slime. There's a lot of feelings there involved, right? First there's like powder and liquid, and then it's getting big, and then it's okay, and then it's going to your fingers. You use a lot of those descriptive words. You can add all of that, and it's squishy. There's a lot of in there. How's the poetry going? It looks like it's not even open.
Stop.
Becky, how are you doing?
I don't know.
You don't know. Let's see. Pick one poem. Let's look at it together.
I don't know what poem.
Okay.
Okay. Tell your opinion of this. Packers making
What's something else that's always changing?
Your
Make a comparison in there.
Okay.
I know. I'm trying to think. So what's something that's always continually changing too?
Let me do this.
That doesn't have to be related to fashion at all. It's something that's always evolving, like the weather is always changing. So fashion and weather are always changing, they're always evolving, they're always, nature is changing just like fashion. You could make a comparison in there, make it a bit more powerful that way. Emotions change constantly, weather changes constantly. Chameleons, the animal chameleon, always changing its colors to fit in. Fashion, you're always wearing fashion to try to fit in. You could do a poem like that. But I think making some comparisons to things that are not fashion will make your point about fashion stronger. So they could tell.
What?
That's more than me. Okay, so I want to see if you can make some connections to things that are not fashion related. I think it'll make your poem stronger. So think, you said diamond poem is where you're comparing two different things. Yeah, but I'm thinking more in like a similes metaphors kind of a way, where you're making those comparisons. So yeah, well so fashion is always changing. Like I don't know, you could what kind of topic? The color in the sky, you know, like it shows weather. Things are always changing in the sky. Sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes the color changes in the sunset or in the sunrise. Just like fashion is always changing. Or you can do it where like a chameleon is always changing colors to fit in. Fashion is always changing to try to fit in. Depends on what you want to say about fashion. You have to decide that. It's not my call.
What's a bacon hair?
Think about it for a minute, and when you decide what comparison you want to make, I can help you. But I can't make that decision.
Wait,